I welcome everyone. We're about to start. A few little technical issues. We're going to make it work. Welcome to Kempsey Shire Council's public forum being held for the first time in the Riverview Movies Cinema 3. It's historic. It is being held here as a result of a unanimous decision supporting the Merrill Minute at the October meeting, requesting the General Manager find a more suitable venue due to the community interest in the matter of seeking a special rate variation. For those people who've got placards, all very well to have them, but if you can keep them down while you're listening to people, because people behind you mightn't be able to see. I remind all people attending this meeting that it is being webcast on YouTube with audio and vision. A recording of the meeting is available on the internet and is required to be available for 12 months. Private recordings, including taking photographs by members of the public gallery, are not allowed. This ruling is to maintain the integrity of the meeting proceedings. Please ensure all devices, like mobile phones, are on silent mode. On behalf of the Council, I welcome all people in the public gallery and observing live on the internet to this public forum. I acknowledge that this meeting is on Dunghutti land, and we pay respect to elders past and present. We'll also welcome any other Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people with us. I now call on any councillors or staff who have a conflict of interest declaration, please. If you could put your light on, if you have one. Councillor Wyatt, please.
Thank you. I have a conflict of interest with item 10.3 as my family has an association with one of those community groups.
Thank you, Councillor Wyatt. Mr General Manager.
Yeah, through Mr Mayor, I have a non-pecuniary, non-significant conflict of interest in relation to 11.1, the rescission motion.
Thank you. I beg your pardon. Can anyone not hear up the back? A few hands have gone up. We got any volume control there? We have. We don't want the feedback. Thank you.
What item number is this?
Is the camera on us or?
Yeah, through Mr Mayor. We're just going to see the lighting in the cinemas are not as bright as what we're expecting. We are just getting one of the staff to go out and see if they can be lit up even more.
Yes, I hope you all understand this is the first time I've tried this, and it's a great venue. You fit a lot more people in, so it's wonderful that you've all turned out, but we just need to make sure we can do the best we can so you can hear and we can all see each other. It would be great. So I'll just continue on for a moment. Hopefully you can hear me. Oh, sorry, Councillor Addison, please. You have a conflict?
Yeah, I'd like to declare an interest, non-pecuniary and pecuniary, that I'm actually a ratepayer of a number of properties in Kempsey and have been for many years.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. No further ones. So you can see who's sitting at the front, everyone. I'm going to name all the people here and just ask them to show a hand up if they are aware of who they are. Thank you. So on my right, with Councillor Dean Saul, Councillor Simon Ferguson, Councillor Kerry Riddington, Councillor Arthur Bain. On my left, Councillor Scott Butterfield, Councillor Alexandra Wyatt, Councillor Anthony Patterson, yes, we all know where he is, and Councillor Kinney Ring. Yes. And our staff here on my right is Mr Craig Milburn, General Manager. Then again, hand up, Mr Wes Trotter, Director of Utilities, Mr Michael Jackson, Director of Operations and Planning, Mr Steve Mitchell, Director Corporate and Commercial, Daniel Thorogood, Mr Daniel Thorogood, Group Manager Governance and Information Services, and challenged by being here, but thank you, Mr Thorogood. Thank you. I'm now going to ask the General Manager, Mr Milburn, to outline the guidelines for this public forum, and it's the same rules for every public forum. Thank you, Mr Milburn.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Read from Council's Code of Meeting Practice. Each speaker will be allowed 5 minutes to address the Council. This time is to be strictly enforced by the Chairperson. Speakers of public forums must not digress from the item on the agenda of the Council meeting they have applied to address the Council on. If a speaker digresses to irrelevant matters, the Chairperson is to direct the speaker not to do so. Direction from the Chairperson, the speaker will not be further heard. A councillor, including a Chairperson, may, through the Chairperson, ask questions of a speaker following their address at a public forum. Questions put to the speaker must be direct, succinct and without argument. Speakers are under no obligation to answer a question put to them, by a councillor. However, answers by the Speaker to each question are limited to 1 minute. Speakers at public forums cannot ask questions of the council, councillors or council staff. The General Manager or the nominee may, with the concurrence of the Chairperson, address the Council for up to 5 minutes in response to an address to the Council at a public forum after the address and any subsequent questions and answers have been finalised. When addressing the Council, speakers at public forums must comply with this code and all other relevant codes, Council codes, policies and procedures. Speakers must refrain from engaging in disorderly conduct, public alleging breaches of Council's Code of Conduct or making other potentially defamatory statements. If the Chairperson considers that the Speaker of the public forum has engaged in this type of conduct, the Chairperson may request the person to refrain from the inappropriate behaviour and to withdraw and unreservedly apologise for any inappropriate comments. Where the Speaker fails to comply with the Chairperson's requests, the Chairperson may immediately require the person to stop speaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. We have 12 speakers today. I remind each speaker you are presenting information which may benefit councils to be better informed on particular decisions they have to make at the council meeting tomorrow. As the General Manager said, you may not ask questions other than rhetorical, possibly. Though I ask each speaker and other members of the public gallery to respect this forum and its rules, respect each other and respect the challenging role each councillor has in considering the information being presented today by the speakers. This information, the submissions and the extensive documentation in the meeting's report and tomorrow's debate will all be considered carefully. Our speakers are Dick Pearson, speaking for Kempsey Shire Residents Association Incorporated, Julie Coburn, Mark Walker, Genevieve Lovell, Patricia Wheeldon, Kyle Arnott, Hannah Ralph, Fred Andrews, speaking for Crescent Head Residents and Ratepayers Association, David Duff, speaking for New South Wales Farmers Association, Macleay Valley, Branch, Ken Scotton, Kelly Flanagan and John Moore. Our first speaker is Dick Pearson. You'd come to the microphone, please, Mr. Pearson. Thank you.
Don't know why we need a stool. I'm not going to be here more than 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors, for the opportunity to present. I'm speaking on behalf of the Kempsey Shire Residents and Ratepayers Association Incorporated, which has affiliations with other like-minded community groups. I'd like to thank the Mayor and councillors at the last meeting for directing the General Manager to find an alternative venue. I'd like to acknowledge that since the SRV was first proposed, the deficit projections have come down somewhat, down to 24 million, and the SRV currently being proposed being 42.7%. I'd also like to acknowledge that Director Mitchell's report clearly states that there are potentially more savings to be mined. Unfortunately, and it's unfair that most of the current councillors find themselves in the position they are in. They've got some really tough decisions to make, and I don't think any of us would want to be in their shoes. Regardless of what decision is made at the council meeting tomorrow regarding the SRV, we'll wake up on Wednesday morning and the financial sustainability problem will still be there to one level or another. The community, I believe, has a role and an obligation to help these councils figure it out. We're all in this together. Just some suggestions, and that's all I'm going to make. Every effort should be made to properly identify community expectations to separate needs from wants. In my opinion, there's been an over-reliance on potentially flawed surveys in the past. the Micro-Mix Community Satisfaction Survey, and more recently the SRV survey in your same Macleay. The flaw is that the surveys don't or haven't specifically asked the community what they are prepared to forego in the light or alternative to special rate variation. I would suggest that councillors need to take an active role in framing such surveys to ensure the appropriate questions are asked. I would also suggest that councillors take an active role in identifying potential discretionary expenditures. I would suggest they forensically examine the remainder of the 2023-24 operating plan and that element of the 24-25 operating plan that will be in play prior to the council elections September next year. Perhaps the most critical thing I would suggest council do is carefully craft the 24-28 delivery program for the next council. I think you will appreciate how difficult it was walking in as a new councillor, trying to make sense of things. So perhaps try and leave the new council with a more robust and critically examined delivery program. The other aspect I would suggest councillors review and rein in the General Manager's delegations of authority and take a more active position in decisions.
Order. Thank you.
And
Here in silence, please.
And take more active position in decision making. I'm not suggesting micromanaging, but perhaps a little bit of that needs to be undertaken initially.
1 minute to go.
I'd also remind the audience that tomorrow's vote is not the end. If a decision is made to put an application to IPART, the community can still lodge submissions with IPART. IPART doesn't have to approve what's put up to them, and circumstances can change between now and June. Councillors don't have to increase rates come June 24, particularly if the financial situation and events occur that could lessen the SRV even further. So let's be clear that tomorrow isn't the end of the SRV game, it's perhaps just the start. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. You might have some questions. Any councillors have a question for Mr. Pearson, please? No questions, Mr. Pearson? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Julie Coburn. Like this speaker we just had and all the speakers, it's a no against 10.1 special rate variation. So, Julie Coburn, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Council's now published this draft long-term financial plan 10.1.1, which differs from what was outlined to the community, in particular the 3 scenarios for the SRV. Second and third options are obviously rhetoric, as no one would ever pay a higher amount, which impacts the results outlined in documents 10.1.4 and 10.1.5. These reflect the community's survey results and submissions, which overwhelmingly say no. This doesn't reflect the principles of community engagement outlined in current IPNR guidelines or Council's community engagement strategy, as those surveys and submissions were presented to Council and you, the councillors, in good faith that these figures were actually being considered. What this did cause was real trauma amongst some members of the community, as many are already under financial stress, living on low or fixed incomes. It created a genuine outcry from the residents as the proposals were extreme, to say the least, and truly showed how out of touch the Council's SLT is with its constituents. To us, it felt like a form of intimidation and has piqued mental health concerns for many. I say to Council that this is unacceptable ethically and socially, and you should be made accountable for this. Any attempt to game our trust is now gone, and we have spoken. So council states, given the extensive community feedback received through the SRV investigation, the decision to increase interest rates and the analysis of the capacity to pay report 10.1.3, it's recommended that the level of asset management and financial security represented by SRV options 2 and 3 are not viable for council to consider. At no time has council conceded that the community has categorically said no to any increase, referred 10.1.4 and 10.1.5. The published SRV proposal now offers 3 scenarios: base case 7.9%, option 1 42.7 and option 2 39.5. All of these are based on a rate peg estimate of 2.5% each year. Now this rate peg may be lower, but it may also be higher, so again another grey area for ratepayers to consider. If this was disclosed to the community, there would have been an overwhelming vote for the base case. Now, each year for the last 5 years, as part of the legislated annual IPNR, council have placed on public exhibition, again only available online, so excluding a large proportion of the community, and adopted an LTPFP that includes the strategies and actions required to achieve financial sustainability. Clearly, this work has not been successful in returning council to a balanced budget position. The plan adopted in June forecast a 10-year deficit of $103 million, which has now been revised to $79 million. Again, begs the question of what can really be achieved. There's also the review by IPART of the rate peg methodology. The final report was issued on the 9th of November this year, briefly referred to by council in 10.1.1 and will be adopted in 24-25. Now, this new methodology allows council to vary their income annually to reflect changes in the cost of providing local government's goods and services due to inflation and other external factors, and continues to allow a population factor. Another note is that IPART states that councils can also choose not to reduce rates to previous levels once SRV periods end. Now, in accordance with the Local Government Act of 1993, councils are required to follow principles of sound financial management. They must ensure its spending is responsible and sustainable, undertake responsible and sustainable investments in infrastructure for the benefit of the local community, implement effective financial and asset management, and have regard to achieving intergenerational equity. There is an overwhelming feeling that many of us and our children won't be able to afford to live here, creating generational trauma. Whereas council's fiscal responsibility. Council has publicly blamed previous council and councillors for the embedded financial position that we now find ourselves in, and I believe the community shouldn't be seen as the pot of gold to consistently pull them out of trouble. Point SRV applied in 2016 of 37.54%. Council have stated that the only way for council to grow rate income without an SRV is through population growth and subsequent development. This is outlined in their document Kempsey Local Growth Management Strategy 2040-41. This growth has already started, particularly in areas such as Southwest Roxham, and continue creating population and economic growth, creating more rate income.
1 minute to go.
Stop this rhetoric and historic culture of blame and mismanagement of public money and take responsibility. Show more respect to the community for its opinions and its responses. I implore the councillors to hear us. We say no to any rate increase at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you very much for your presentation, Ms. Coburn. Do we have any questions, please? No, thank you very much. Our next speaker is Mark Walker. He is against 10.1, special rate variation.
Mr Mayor, councillors, my fellow ratepayers, we are in the middle of an affordability crisis. We are suffering death by 1,000 cuts. Each one incremental, each one minimal, but all of them adding up to one unbearable whole. But some of us are doing it even tougher. I believe it was Mahatma Gandhi who coined the phrase, "The measure of a society is how it treats its weakest members." So when we treat our weakest, our poorest, our most disadvantaged harshly or thoughtlessly, what sort of message are we sending to them? We are effectively saying to those people, you do not matter. If you can't afford to pay, tough bickies. Build a bridge. Get over it. And we all know that the federal and state governments have reduced financial assistance grants and cost-shifted assets and responsibilities onto councils right across the country. That unfortunate reality does not, however, give our council the right to do its own cost shifting, passing those basic revenue cuts on to ratepayers. Council's job is to provide the services that residents need at an affordable cost. If this proposed SRV is approved, the council will fail in that most fundamental of roles. Because it's quite clear from figures in council's own capacity to pay report, copies of which I've delivered to all of you, from my own research done this week, that large segments of the local community are already struggling to pay the rent or their mortgage. It's what is known in social welfare terms as housing-related poverty. 66% of ratepayers in the coastal north region have rents or mortgage payments in excess of 30% of their household income. Upriver, 42% of households are in receipt of state government rate rebates. Also, 15% of upriver households have mortgage costs in excess of 30% of their household income. In the Aldevilla Airport area, 35% of households are in receipt of state government rate rebates. In coastal south, supposedly the most affluent area of the Shire, still 11% of households are paying a mortgage that is more than 30% of their household income. These people are already doing it tough. These people cannot afford the basic cost of living. We have all had to tighten our belts. We have had to cut our cloth to suit our budget. It's time council did the same. Council has effectively a closed shop. They know we can't get away. They know we don't have any real options to opt out of any of the services they provide. And this closed market, entirely lacking in any form of active competition, drives both complacency and a stubborn refusal to see the blindingly obvious. And council is totally captured by the dominant paradigm that says this is what councils do and this is the way that we do it. It is this stagnation in thinking and lack of real leadership that we are complaining about. Same old, we'll no longer cut the grass. 1 minute ago. The SRV is the easy way out. It's lazy policy. What we are all saying to council, and especially to our elected councillors, is that the old way of doing things is clearly not working anymore. If the SRV goes ahead, we will see an increase in hardship among those most vulnerable in our community. We will see more people fall through the cracks into homelessness or worse. The community will need to accept that some things may need to change. Some services may need to be defunded or downgraded. Others may need to be reimagined. We need innovation in our approach to this issue, not the hackneyed old saw of raise the rates. We need to seek alternatives to the proposed SRV. We must not fail our most needy. We must not fail our most disadvantaged. The proposed SRV is the wrong way to go. It takes us backwards and not forwards. We must find another way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Are there any questions for Mr. Walker? Councillor Wyatt, and I have one as well. So, Councillor Wyatt, please.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Sorry, I can't see you very well, so I've just got to read from here. The paper that you sent through You've got the rental as a percentage income. Those figures that you just quoted a little while ago, could you re-quote those? And did you say that they were the mortgage those on mortgage as opposed to those on rent?
Both. Rent and mortgage.
So I've got these ones for the rental one. Could he just quote the ones you did about the mortgage ones again, please?
Sure.
For each of those groups.
Coastal North, 66% of ratepayers have rents or mortgages, so that's a combined figure in excess of 30%. Upriver, 42% of households are in receipt of state government rebates. 15% of upriver households have mortgage costs in excess of 30% of household income. In Aldabilla Airport area, 35% of households are in receipt of state government rate rebates. In Coastal South, 11% of households are paying a mortgage that is more than 30% of their household income. Those figures come directly from the Morrison Low Capacity to Pay report. And I'd like to add, while I'm here and I have the chance, that this morning I got a love letter from NRMA. My annual house insurance has gone up $250 year on year.
Thank you, Mr. Walker.
Was there another question?
Councillor White, did you have another question? Thank you. My question, Mr. Walker, could you expand, please, on the components that feed into housing-related poverty, which you talked about?
I'm not sure I understand the question, Councillor.
So what are the components, what issues are affecting housing-related poverty? You said there's a whole...
It's a widely accepted measure of poverty. If your rent or your mortgage payments exceed 30% of your total income, you're considered to be in housing-related poverty.
It's just that figure of being above 30%.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Any further questions? No other questions. Thank you, Mr. Walker. We now move on to Genevieve Lovell, who's speaking against 10.1 special rate variation. Thank you, Ms. Lovell. Could you hold on a second, please? We have a technical issue.
Just while we're doing that, I'll just let you know that I'm actually representing Spadco. I'm not speaking on my own behalf. I'm speaking on behalf of Spadco. I'll tell you in one moment.
So we've got it up there. Thank you, Genevieve.
Which is Stewart's Point and District Community Organisation. So I'm not referring to the general Kempsey LGA in any of these slides. I'm simply referring to the work we've done in the Stewart's Point area and the outcome.
Okay, thank you. 5 minutes starts. Okay, and could you just give us a wave when you want the slide to change, please?
Oh, right, okay. First of all, I'd just like to give you some context of who Spadco is and what we do. We're a community organisation and we work on behalf of Stewart's Point, Grassy Heads and Fishman's Reach, and we meet fairly regularly. There's a committee, we meet fairly regularly. I have the chairman here with me today, and we deal with issues that we've got in our community. If you wouldn't mind changing the slide, thanks. Thanks very much. I just want to give you a brief outline of what sort of facilities we have in Stewart's Point, because we actually are one of the issues here. We're one of the big issues here. So we've got a road in and out, we've got street lighting, community hall, you can see what we have. So my question is, so what can we share? Who can we invite to be part of what Stewart's Point has? Change the slide, thanks. What we did was we set up a page where we asked for volunteers to be interviewed, and we used the calculator on the site. So everyone who was interviewed, of which we chose 10 people, we used the calculator on the site, and then we asked them to disclose to us some personal details. There were 3 people who did interviews. The chairman did interviews, I did interviews, and one other member of Spadco did interviews. We were trying to, at that stage, ascertain who was the general public in the Stewart's Point area and what were the outcomes that we were going to have. So we interviewed 10 people. The top one was a couple who were pensioners who owned their own home, and their their answer to this question was, yes, we could pay $10 extra a week. We wouldn't want to, but we could without it affecting us particularly badly. Number 2 down, because we ranked these according to our findings, was a pensioner couple, retired pensioner couple who owned their home, but they were living on a pension. And they said, yes, they would be able to pay an extra $10 a week. However, 2 things would occur. One was that they would move their dentist appointments from half yearly to yearly, and they would move their optometry appointments from once a year to every 18 months. So that's the impact they'd have. Rate number 2, to cope with $10 extra a week. So the third person was a single mother, 2 school-aged children. She said that she was renting. She could pay, but with difficulty. She visited her mother once a week in an aged care facility in this area, and she did her shopping at the same time. So her response, if she had to find $10 extra a week, is that she'd visit her mother fortnightly to save the petrol, and she'd cut down on protein 1 night a week for her children. In other words, she'd serve meals without protein 1 night a week. From there on in, every other person we interviewed, and these ranged from homeowners to renters, single male, single female, couples, some with children and some without, said they could not manage to actually pay $10 more a week. We've done a submission to the council, and the council have these statistics in that submission. But what happened here was with category D, and I don't mean that in any way other than just A to D, with category D, what happened was these 6 interviewed couples or singles, as it turned out to be, had no capacity at all to pay.
1 minute to go.
Now, the problem we have at Stewart's Point, of course, is that we were linked coastal north with Southwest Rocks. As it turns out, Stewart's Point is a very low socioeconomic area. We have a lot of mortgage stress and rent stress in our area. We have one person who we interviewed is already $650 behind. So what we have on our hands is homelessness, impacts of bad health, relying on the health system because simply they will not be able to rent in our area. My point to you is that we have to think differently. We've got an opportunity here not to separate people out and say, you people are to blame. We've simply got to think differently. We've got to be innovators. We've got to think some other way of raising the money that this area generates so that we no longer have to depend on rates. Thanks very much.
Thank you. That's time for your presentation. Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Lovell. We'll email that presentation to all councillors. Thank you very much. Are there any questions, please? Councillor Patterson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Lovell, for your presentation and representing SPATCO and the people of Stewart's Point today. I was just wondering, you were quoting $10 a week. Where did you get that figure from?
We went through the economics in the growth strategy and we determined how much variation there was in what people earned and how we just had to pick a figure somewhere between $0 and $20, so we picked 10.
Yes, thank you.
Mayor Hawful, would I be able to ask a question in relation to this to the General Manager in relation to...
No, not at this time.
No, okay, well,
Mr.
just going to make a comment.
So, Councillor Patterson?
Yes.
No comments can be made, but there could be summary at the end by the General Manager if he wants to correct any misinformation. You have another question for Ms. Lovell, please?
Yeah, just one more thing. Did any of the SPATCO people that were in the scenarios, did anyone do the rating chart on the Your Say Macleay that gives you an average of what you'd pay?
Yes, so what happened with every one of these interviews, which were conducted under ethical conditions, we started off by, every time we started the interview, we actually did the rate calculation first.
Yeah.
And
Thank-
in the submission, you have those.
Thank you. And one last question. Did any of this, the consultation you had with those people, did them write down anything about what they were happy to lose, like in services or like in cuts?
Well,
not happy to, but
I'm happy to answer the question, but the issue that we've got is, and most of them raised this with us, is the sewage, because as you know, we've got this problem and we don't have sewage. So in every one of these cases, I'm not quite sure, Mary Lou, whether you found something different, but in every one of the cases, what they said is we don't want the sewage. We can't afford to pay for it.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no other questions. But thank you very much for your presentation, Ms. Lovell. Our next speaker is Patricia Wheeldon, and she's speaking against 10.1, special rate variation.
A large number of ratepayers and residents, including myself, first heard about the SRV through others and not from council, which I thought was an important lack of communication. The online survey regarding the SRV was seen by myself and others as loaded. There was no option to express our need for council to stay within rate-pegged parameters, an amount which already will put a number of residents in hardship. We ask that council go back to basics, roads, water, sewerage, etc., and not indulge in speculative ventures. These types of projects are best left in the hands of private entrepreneurs.
Order. Order.
Also,
I'm sorry, excuse me, order. Whenever you do that, you cut into the speaker's time. You can clap at the end, that's fine, but if you do that every time she makes a point that you agree with, you're going to cut into her time and she will not be able to finish her presentation. So I just ask you to hold it to the end, please. Thank you, Ms. Wheeldon.
costs of water, etc., have risen hugely, runs separate from general rates, so it seems to be an attempt at bypassing rate pegging, which was instigated to safeguard ratepayers. The rise is in an extremely low socio-economic area with ratepayers and residents unable to absorb these increases. They don't have the rises in income levels to ameliorate any type of rate rise, in fact. It's insulting for council to suggest ratepayers pay off the rates as it's obvious we cannot pay, we simply can't pay. As a matter of fact, we note this is not the only council currently applying for excessive rate rises, and it appears to me to be nothing more than a land grab. That's my thoughts. We are not a magic pudding. Apologies to Norman Lindsay. We cannot magically produce more money. Council staff receiving over $300,000 per annum, including benefits, are truly unaffordable in this shire. We have a low income, and council debt levels make this unsustainable. On this subject, many grants offered by state and federal governments are honey pits we need to avoid if they're going to be used for speculative ventures. If they're going to be used for basic services or upgrades to already existing facilities such as Gladstone Pool, we simply cannot afford to be paying dollar for dollar on the cost of grants going to the speculative ventures, and certainly can't afford further debt. Servicing debts results in outgoings that do nothing for the area. Every dollar spent in repaying interest is simply wasted revenue, doesn't assist in filling one pothole. During talks with several ratepayers lately, they noted they've been awaiting contact from council, and despite several emails and even follow-up messages left by phone, they've had no response. It does not indicate good faith or efficient practice by council. Several years ago, the ratepayer groups all got together and asked the council put through a motion stating they would not add arsenic, cadmium, lead and mercury to the water supplies. Only 3 very brave councillors stood up for the ratepayers at the time. The rest declined to assist. And I've always remembered those three councillors, and other people have been made aware of the people who were brave enough to stand up for the residents and ratepayers. We apparently have this ongoing issue of this being added to the water supply. I haven't heard that it's been retracted at any stage, so correct me if I'm wrong. Also,
1 minute to go.
Thank you. I note we hear the regular acknowledgement of country and aware that Kempsey Shire Council enthusiastically supported the federal Labor government's disastrous Yes campaign. This is pretty hypocritical, I think, when council proposes raising rates to unaffordable levels, resulting in a number of our high population of First Nations people being unable to afford to live in their own homes. It's meaningless, empty virtue signalling.
Thank you, Ms Weldon. Do we have any questions? Councillor Ferguson, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mrs Weldon. Could you give us a couple of quick examples of things that you would prefer us leave alone and leave to the private sector?
Well, I'd say that the cinema complex should have been left to the private sector. A lot of ratepayers objected at the time. That was one. Probably the Slim Dusty Centre should have been left. I should qualify that by saying that we were told by council it would bring tourists to the area, and it was stuck out on the highway miles from Kempsey. We thought it was going to go in the showground for a while, but I don't see how it's bringing tourists into Kempsey. That's my thoughts.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you, Ms Weldon.
Thank you.
Speaker 6 is Kyle Arnott. He's going to be speaking against 10.1, special rate variation.
Beautiful, something to sit on. Good to go?
Yep, thank you.
Fantastic. So in my little thing that I'm doing, I've been looking into the economic impact it's going to have on our town if the SRV is approved. So according to the Morrison Low capacity to pay report, the median income is $1,114 per week. Now that is combined, and that's assuming that you've got two people, more than one person living in a house paying the rates. Moving on to how that SRV at the 42.7% will affect it. Over the first year, I think it was going to look like an increase of about $102, which works out to be $2 per week, which was mentioned in the Argus paper a while ago. Just over 13,000 residential rateable properties, you're looking at $26,288 per week and 1.37 million over a year. Now that only goes up as you keep going through. Rhetorical question, but what is it, how can we as a town afford to go out and support these businesses that are also going to be paying rates when we can't afford to pay what we pay now? It makes no sort of sense that we're going to be paying through the pocket and not being able to support our local businesses as well as their rates going up as well. So my further question to that was something along the lines of, has there been an economic sustainability report done to show us as a community that if this SRV does get approved, that our town isn't going to turn into a ghost town. We're not going to have more businesses going out of business. We're going to have people that can actually afford to go and support our locals. Moving on to the petition numbers. So as you're aware, the submission was, I think it was 8,400. We've had an additional about 600. So we're currently sitting at 9,189 signatures on the petition. That is online and on paper. That is just under a third of the Shire's population that's going against what you guys have proposed. And over 70% of total residential rateable pay, residential, let's try again. Residential rateable properties. There we go. So you've got over 70% of the people that are going to be paying these rates saying that they can't afford to do it and they're opposed to any kind of SRV. Now, moving forward into next year, these 9,000 or over 9,000 people are going to remember how tomorrow goes and how the vote on the SRV goes. Our message is very, very clear, and I've made it clear from the beginning. We're not against progress. We're not against improving our townships and our community. But we need to find a solution that is sustainable for all of our residents of the Kempsey LGA. I'm not done. Now, this SRV, it strikes at the very heart of what our community needs and the prosperity and livelihood that is Kempsey Council and Kempsey LGA.
1 minute to go.
It is our duty as residents of this LGA to challenge this un-Australian and demoralising proposal. This is our financial future in your hands. The community is putting its trust in you to make the right decision tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arnott. We have one councillor with a question. Councillor Patterson, please.
Thank you, Kyle, for your presentation.
No,
do you think sustainability has got anything to do with matching costs with, inflation? Looking forward, you mentioned it a couple of times.
So, can you try and sort of rephrase that a little bit better for me?
I was just that you said you want our council to be sustainable. So, looking forward, sustainably.
Yeah, so sustainability is one thing, but asking us to pay for it to make it sustainable is another. We're already struggling as it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, mate.
Thank you. Councillor Wynne, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Kyle, for your presentation. And feel free not to answer this, but what will the rate rise look like for you? How will it impact your life?
Well, I'm already struggling to make ends meet. Like, I've been fortunate enough that Crystal hasn't had to go back to work after having our kids, but now we're seriously looking into having her go back to work. Like, we're struggling as it is. Like, between our insurance, our mortgage, the cost of food going up, the cost of fuel going up, we are at our ends.
Thank you.
That's it.
Councillor White has a question for you. Councillor White, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Kyle.
That's okay.
And I hope you're not unwell because you don't sound very well.
I'm
but
still recovering from whatever I had about 2 months ago.
Yeah,
so.
and I do congratulate you for taking on the Figure It Out group. That's a mammoth task. And I have read most of the comments on the Facebook post and heard your interview on radio. But I would ask the same question that Councillor Ferguson asked about what kind of services do you think that could be cut as part A and part 2, whatever happened, would Figure It Out, Kempsey Shire Council move towards that now? Like, we have to have some tangible, proactive, rather than say, fix it.
No,
would you be willing to do that?
No, I 100% see what you're coming from and what you sort of mentioned there. So, and I know these are very, very minimal in the big scheme of things, and as much as I know that the community events are really important to bring us together, things like that need to go, or not need to, but they should be considered to go up to the bottom of the priority list to make sure that we're still going to be like, so that we're making money. Like that's the whole goal here, is to get out of the red. And as much as I know it's not a massive portion of where the funds go, it's still important to at least be seen trying.
Thank you. Could you expand on which community events you think should go?
I'm just trying to think of the ones that I mentioned on the radio a couple of weeks ago. I think it was like the alleyway stuff. Yep. The It's Okay on the Maclay. Like just, I shouldn't have to go into specifics of events. Just community events that, as much as I know they're important, and it's important for us as a community to come together, it needs to not be prioritised over our financial well-being.
Okay. Did you know that most of those functions you just talked about are wholly funded by the state government?
I did not, but thank you for bringing it to my attention.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Wyatt again?
Yeah, just one question, another question. In the capacity, in the role that you've taken on, and for the rest of you as part of that group as well, has it surprised you, or have you learned or been enlightened, good or indifferent, about a lot of the planning documents that are put in place? What surprises me is that the community engagement prior to now on all those plans that go out into public display have been quite low. Has that surprised, figure it out, Kempsey Shire Council, that those are actually there and that they have been on public display? And do you think that going forward, your group has actually shined a light on that, and the community might look at that a bit more in detail in future?
I do think so. Like, as you mentioned, we've done a lot of, I'm not going to say a lot of the legwork in informing the community on sort of what has been happening. But I think moving forward, a lot of people now, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, will most likely be checking in on this, maybe not every day, maybe not every week, but maybe every couple of weeks, to kind of go, hey, what's going on?
Thank you, Ms. Arnett. Our next speaker is Hannah Ralph. She's speaking against 10.1 special rate variation.
No? Okay. There are some points that need to be morally considered, as the community need to understand why we are perpetually in this position. We need to think outside the box in regard to moving forward, because looking back, we've had 4 increases to our rates in a decade. A quick outline: in 2011, Council advised a shortfall of $8 million per year, which works out to be a very similar amount to the current amount that's in deficit. That's despite having an increase in 2012 of 11.37%, another one in 2014 of 37.54%, another one in 2018 of 6.5%, and another one just last year with 2%. Now, with history in mind, IPART's report from 2012/2013 actually stated that available data suggest that Kempsey Community, has a lower than average capacity to pay than other comparable councils and across New South Wales councils as a whole. Despite council receiving a cumulative 57.41% more since 2012, we are here today because of the original forecasted deficit of $103 million. That was revised down to $79 million just a few days ago. With community feedback and another investigation into council's financial stability, this resulted in a recommended increase of another 42.7%, I believe, from the Argus article. If this is submitted by council and approved by IPART, it will total a 100.11% increase to the community in 11 years, which is a renowned low socioeconomic area. Being cumulative, and unsustainable. Particularly with annual wage growth in Australia averaging out at 3%, the added complexity of job insecurities, the pandemic, natural disasters, cost of living increases, we're all feeling the pinch, it's all hurting us. It simply doesn't compete. We can't keep up with the existing rates, and it's going to be impossible to meet the proposed increase. The additional SRV, coupled with the fact that wages have never kept up with the increased cost of living, creates a huge fear for our community that is renowned to comprise of low and or fixed incomes, such as retirees. This fear is heightened because our community already pay above average rates, and it's unclear whether Kempsey's homelessness services have the capacity to assist a sudden or significant increase of those in need. One of Council's suggestions of reducing costs is to close the airport, meaning we'll no longer have aerial, land or life-saving support for fires, floods or emergency transport of patients from our hospital. This is guaranteed to have a negative impact and will be the direct cause of unnecessary deaths and losses that could have otherwise been prevented. With consideration to the obvious risks to safety, emergency response, well-being and homelessness, another SRV of this scale does not equate to a reasonable impact on the ratepayers. The capacity to pay report released last month outlines that it is considered there is some level of capacity to pay. However, it is important for Council to acknowledge that there are areas of significant disadvantage within the community and that it does not significantly marginalise particularly vulnerable individuals and households. In the report, there is uncertainty around the accuracy of the data provided, as the median weekly rent and the rental as percentage of income data that are indicated is significantly lower than any other data I've been able to source.
1 minute to go.
This report also states private renting and these residents are unlikely to be impacted by the SRV. This is ambiguous and should be definitive, as it seems to trend towards the community historically being financially responsible for the continually growing deficit despite continually paying cumulatively more. Our community is already forced to be experts of living within our means. I request Kempsey Council to explore the option of appointing an administrator to assist in your recovery.
Thank you, Ms. Ralph. Thank you for your exhaustive facts there too. You've really gone through it. Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Bain, please.
Thank you very much, Hannah. That was really a moving presentation. And I thank you for bringing out the point in the capacity to pay report, which I also noticed said often brought up the point that it won't have an impact on renters. Can you explain why you think it will have an impact on renters?
Order, could we hear Ms. Ralph's response, please?
Money doesn't grow on trees, generally speaking. How many people with multiple properties do you think can afford to absorb multiple rate increases? They're going to pass it on to renters. There's no law stopping it, is there?
The rhetorical question. Thank you. Any further questions?
Well, I don't. Yeah. Anyway.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Ralph. Our eighth speaker is Fred Andrews, who's the Crescent Head Resident and Ratepayers Association. Again, Crescent Head Residents and Ratepayers Association, and he's speaking against 10.1 special rate variation. Thank you, Mr. Andrews.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We right to go? Until last Tuesday, KSC SRV proposal was in relation to a forecast 103 million deficit. I'm now astonished that this deficit is now reduced by 24 million. How financial results from management can be manipulated so quickly is simply beyond comprehension. Some of these savings have been found from reduced backlog repairs and maintenance, 5.3 million over 10 years, street lighting to LED savings, 1.8 million over 10 years, which was included in your fact sheet, but somehow missed from the previous estimates in that fact sheet. The financial forecasts highlight depreciation and staffing levels as two of the most expensive issues. In relation to staff levels, we have been informed by senior management that KSC has no capacity to reduce staff. My reply would be KSC has no choice but to reduce staff. Consistent review and alteration of the workforce has been promoted as a reduction by KSC in expenses. 1 less director, 3 less senior managers. It fails to include that since 2018, staff increases of over 30%, almost 100 people, added to the KSC pay many of their workforce at least 10% above award, apparently because we're a remote locality. The decision to pay 10% is approximately $2 million per year to ratepayers, $10 million over 5 years. On top of this, senior staff are paid extremely generously. Council has employed a consultancy firm to provide a 38-page capacity to pay report on ratepayers' ability to pay. A report based on data from 2016 to 2021. Well before the massive increase we've seen in property values with outdated income information. I'd consider more ratepayers' money down the drain. I would propose a capacity to pay report be undertaken on Council's ability to pay staff wages. There appears to be no limit on the number of staff employed. Vacancies are being advertised right now. Income to pay seems limitless, like water or monopoly money. But there is a limit to what the community can afford, their capacity to pay. 2023 wages, 29 million. Forecast to be 44 million in 2032, an increase of 15 million or 70%. This implies that Council is looking at employing even more staff. Have service increased by 30% since 2018? I think ratepayers would probably say no. KSC's reply in relation to staff levels is benchmarking against other councils indicates that council staffing levels are reasonable and not excessive. Really. Other councils' situation has nothing to do with KSC's capacity to pay. Just because others are doing something, it doesn't make it automatically right. One of the major issues is that senior management have no vested interest in this business. I can assure you staff would not be making these same decisions if they were financially affected themselves. The proposed SRV is all about financial management. If KSC were a privately owned business, management would be charged with the responsibility to do what is required with the financial resources it has. Depreciation is the other item, which does have a huge negative impact on financials, with Council having received grant money of over 360 million.
1 minute to go.
We now have a large number of assets which we cannot afford, with the depreciation factor now requiring Council to attempt to increase rates to cover this cost. These assets should never have been depreciated in the financials. We could not afford them without grant money and never will be able to afford replacement costs. Many of these assets had project costs associated that had to be covered by Council and no allowance made for repairs and maintenance. Surely with highly trained staff, these costs should have been foreseen and either budgeted for, or perhaps the grant should not have been applied in the first place. Sound financial decision to give Gowings $2 million? I don't think so. The Adventure Centre, with some councillors and staff still considering borrowing $11 million to complete. The Slim Dusty Centre. Maybe if these projects had not been undertaken, there would be no need to inform Gladstone their pool may be closed. These assets should be maintained where financially possible and where replacement is required. Do you want me to continue? Or?
1 minute. Oh, your time is finished. Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Do we have any questions? Councillor Bain has a question for you, Mr Andrews.
Thank you, Mr Andrews. Now, you are representing the Crescent Head community. Can you give us your opinion on what the impact will be on Crescent Head business and residents?
Well, I believe in this capacity to repay report, Crescent Head rates are classified as about $3,000. I'd say that's about 3 years too old. Crescent Head and Southwest Rocks and Hat property values, I would say, have probably increased, if not double, but triple. The rates in the business centre of Crescent Head, the houses in the main central area, and that'd be about 400, are nearer to $5,000 to $6,000. You work out what the amount of that $4,000 is the residential part you're talking about putting up. Add 42% onto that, and people were working on 94%, and then suddenly it's changed. In the business section, I run a business. My rates are over $15,000 a year. Add your 42% on that, you will be putting away people from investing in the area, and there are many people in the community who are doing it tough. Even though there's a lot of B&Bs and tourists come in, there's still Mrs Baker on the hill. Do you want me to still keep talking?
That's 1 minute for the answer. Thanks, Mr Andrews.
Thank you very much.
Do we have another question? No other questions, so thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now have our next speaker, Mr David Duff, who's speaking against 10.1 special rate variation, and he's speaking on behalf of the New South Wales Farmers Association, Macleay Valley branch.
Mr Mayor, councillors and attendees to this forum, thank you very much for the opportunity to address today. My name's David Duff. I'm Chair of New South Wales Farmers Macleay Valley branch, and today I'm here to discuss the troubling implications of the proposed rate hike and its potential impact on our crucial agricultural stakeholders in the Macleay. Now, I just wish to say that this is from the branch level and under no circumstances is policy of New South Wales farmers. Our branch staunchly opposes the suggested rate increase. While we understand the necessity for additional revenue to fund council operations, our primary concern lies in the inequitable distribution of this burden onto our farm businesses. In the Macleay Valley, where predominant farming systems require larger land portions, consequently increasing land asset values, the current practice of imposing higher charges on farmers based on land size perpetuates economic injustice. Those in agriculture heavily reliant on expansive land for their operations struggle to generate revenue compared to smaller businesses with lower land values. Whether you run a cafe, manage a retail store, or work as a glazier or engage in any other business in the Macleay Valley, it is unjust that farming enterprises face a rate increase disproportionately higher than that of other businesses, which are not only more profitable but also less susceptible to weather and market risks. This seemingly unfair system underscores the necessity for a comprehensive policy review geared towards establishing an equitable rate structure. Such a structure should acknowledge the inherent disparity in targeting larger landholders in agriculture, resembling more of a land tax than a system founded on principles of fairness and sustainable economic policy. The call for a policy review arises from the realisation that the current approach lacks fairness and fails to align with the broader goals of fostering a sustainable and just economic environment in the Macleay Valley. Over the past 5 years, our resilient farmers have faced a barrage of challenges, including droughts, severe bushfires and floods. This has coincided with a substantial reduction in returns from beef, cattle, and the near destruction of the local beekeeping industry. These agricultural systems, burdened by extreme financial challenges, have relied on the value of their land to borrow money for rebuilding, a resilience not shared by other small businesses in Kempsey. Unfairly targeting these businesses without exemptions will be catastrophic for the Macleay's agricultural community and beyond. The financial challenges faced by the council mirror those of farmers. Operating costs have surged, including diesel, labour and contractors. However, there is a crucial difference. Cattle prices have plummeted by over 50%, resulting in negative income for farmers, and many are forced to work off-farm to make ends meet. Imagining the council operating with less than 50% revenue puts into perspective the dire situation farmers face daily. We cannot withstand further financial burdens imposed by this council on our already struggling businesses.
1 minute to go.
Despite the council's commitment in its agribusiness industry plan, quote, to support the development of the Macleay Valley as a location for smart and sustainable agribusiness and to help drive industry, end quote. The proposed rate rise contradicts this goal. Instead of fostering agribusiness, the only thing this proposed rate hike will do is drive more agribusiness out of the Macleay. Farmers are getting a raw deal with the proposed rate increases, charging more based on land size, value, doesn't take into account the tough reality that farmers deal with, like lower profits, unpredictable disasters. It also overlooks the significant contributions that farmers make to the community. The proposed rates go against the council's promise to support farming, putting the future of agriculture in the Macleay Valley on shaky ground.
Thank you, Mr. Duff. Do we have any questions? Councillor Patterson, please.
Thank you, David, for your presentation. Obviously, quite emotional, mate. I can hear you. David, you made a statement about, the land value, because you're obviously bigger property sizes being farmers. State or federal or council, who should we really address for that? Because it's 50%, it's part of your rates, your land value.
I don't know, I can address that in 1 minute, but anyway, I'll have a crack. Thanks for the question. I think the point is that our investment is in our land. And then through the system, council gets to rate us according to our land value. My point is that does not necessarily reflect the earning capacity of that property or that farmer. So why is it that owning land makes you an easy target for tax?
So are you saying in that comment that it's out of whack, the same rate implications to residential in land size is part of 50% of your rates is your land value compared to up the river where you might be on 500 acres and in town you're on half an acre?
Well, I don't really understand how to answer that, Anthony, but I'll put it this way. Our rates will increase under this proposal by $580 a year, and I think council through some studies said that the average farm rate would be $184. Yep. So obviously we're above average. I'm talking personally now. At the end of the 3 years, we will be at $2,500 increase.
Yep. David, you spoke, just one last question if you don't mind, you spoke about the increasing costs of electricity, fuel, wages, contractors, etc. That's sort of right across the board. That impacts on council as well. So what do you think council should do to reduce those costs or those increases?
Well, thanks for the question, Anthony. And my opinion, council is no different to a household or a business, whether it be local government, state government or federal government. You cannot spend more than what you earn. Thanks for that. But so on that, Anthony, the first thing that we've done after 5 years of bloody tough going is we've taken the red pen to our budget and we've put the red line through any cost that we can. Now, I know I do have sympathy for the council and what it's trying to do and the revenue that you need to run, but it's no different to anybody else's household or business. If you're not making the money, you can't spend it.
Just I suppose the last question, David. Do you understand the imposition on councils of rate pegging? Do you understand that imposition?
Not totally.
Put on to council by state government.
To a certain degree, yes, but do I understand it totally? No.
Okay, thanks, David. Cheers.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Ferguson, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Duff. As a fellow businessman, and obviously council is a business as well, can you see any areas or suggest any areas that you would make cuts in council's business?
Order. Thank you. Let's hear the answer, please.
Well, thanks for the question, Simon. I'm not on council, mate, and I think that's the responsibility of councillors to direct the council. I don't want to get into the politics of it, but I think that it's your job to direct council on how it should and where it should cut if necessary.
Awesome, thank you.
Councillor Wyatt, you have a question?
Yes. Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I'm not a farmer, although my dad was. My understanding is that, you know, when you do have those when there's disasters around, so that you can apply for assistance and no interest loans, can you just give me a break? I'm trying to get my question out. And it's a particular question.
We'll pay respect to the questions and the answers, please, people in the gallery, and then we can be more informed. Councillor Wyatt, again, please.
I'm trying to understand the situation. So you do have access to those low interest loans. Admittedly, they're still low interest loans. You mentioned that when you have those disasters, obviously your ability to raise revenue drops by whatever amount that is because your land is not available to you anymore. In those grants, in that assistance that comes out of the state government, those national recovery when we get a disaster, does that include rate rebates? Do you get anything on rate rebates?
No, I don't think so. But in response to your question, if I may, yes, but low interest loans are a long-term fix to a cash flow problem. The short term, and this is the point that I wanted to make about the beef cattle job. If council had to operate on 50% of its current funding, how would you feel about a rate increase?
I'm actually agreeing with you. Yeah. That's why I'm trying to load questions so that I can understand.
Yeah, so they fall well short of what is needed in the short term. In the long term, yes. But look, most farms up the river, and I'll talk about up the river, but most farms all over the Macleay are not viable businesses, as in where people can stay at home and farm. They need to go off farm to supplement the farm. Now, straight away, once they do that, then if 50% of their income, total income, is greater than what they earn off the farm, which is not hard to do with cattle market the way it is, there's an awful lot of other industries that are the same, then the threshold shifts. So they're not earning 50% of their income off the farm, so therefore they're not eligible for all the government assistance that's supposedly put out there. So in this latest disaster, if I can, the government offered a 50% freight subsidy on fodder in and on livestock transport out. as well as a low interest loan.
Thank you, Mr. Duff. That's your minute.
Further heard?
Got more questions?
Thank you.
Further heard?
That's.
Can I ask another question?
Yes, if you have another question, Councillor Wyatt.
Yep. Can I ask him, can you continue what you're going to say?
Thanks very much, the opportunity.
Order. Councillor Wyatt, that is out of order. No. I would like to explain to you that we have the rules so that we can get through all the speakers. If we don't have the time, some of the speakers will not get to speak. So, thank you. Councillor Wyatt, you should not have asked that extra question. And Mr. Duff.
Sorry, I haven't finished.
Councillor Patterson, you've had 3 questions. You have another one, do you?
Yeah, one more question.
Thank you. Could you make it succinct, please? Because that's what we do with our questions. Thank you.
Mr. Duff, do you see I was just thinking about then the very common sort of likelihood that we're in as council? Do you see it as we've got a big area and a small population, just like your farm, a big area with not much livestock? Do you see that coalition, that connection there?
Most certainly in respect to other councils in the state, if that's the question you're asking, Anthony. We have a vast area, and Kempsey Shire Council, as in other regional councils, have a vast area of infrastructure to maintain, which benefits the state.
Yep. Do you believe, like me, that the state government should pay for all our roads?
I'm not prepared to answer that, Anthony. Maybe off. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson.
That's a bit political.
Thank you, Mr. Duff. There are no further questions. Our next speaker is Ken Scotton. He's speaking against 10.1, special rate variation. Thank you, Mr. Scotton.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'll speak on the petition. Over 9,000 signatures rejected any SRV. The residents of Kempsey Shire have spoken and delivered a quantum shift in community engagement with Kempsey Shire Council that has previously been lacking. The SRV proposal, innocuous sounding and heralded as being the financial saviour for future generations of Kempsey Shire, largely underreported via limited distribution through community groups, only advertised online until very late in proceedings, and presented and defended as the only option to save Kempsey Shire from financial oblivion. We were told about interest rates, material and labour cost increases, a new asset register highlighting maintenance that should have been done in the past, cost shifting by federal and state governments, although nothing about cost shifting by KSC to the ratepayers via this SRV. And why not? Residents and ratepayers have largely been unresponsive to past issues affecting the Shire, mostly due to limited public engagement. So with a bit of luck, this one might have just slipped through to the keeper as well. For information, this same guff was trotted out in 2013 to support the last SRV, and here we are today in the same purported predicament. Kempsey Shire residents have, like the rest of Australia, been subjected to massive price increases on all items from food, healthcare, mortgages, rents, fuel, insurance, etc., etc. Most have cut back on essential items to stretch their budgets. Many have given up the simple pleasures of life, and some quite regularly the odd meal or two, to keep the kids fed or a roof over their head. Then came this SRV, a public relations disaster, completely indefensible in the current financial climate, no matter how desperate the argument is to increase rates to suit Council's agenda. The petition is a defining statement from the people of Kempsey Shire and brings with it a clear understanding in the community that in proposing this SRV, KSC is either out of touch with or has no regard for the financial challenges that many or most in our community currently face. The capacity to pay report, yeah, very interesting. Independent consultant, I think not. This consultant provided the same generic report for many New South Wales councils currently seeking an SRV. The theme common to all is the conclusion. Name any shire and the ratepayers have the capacity to pay. Funny who'd have thought it. Unfortunately, the majority of financial information used to create the document came from the 2021 census and as such is totally redundant. Not much has happened in the world since then. RBA rates were at 0.1%, now 4.35. Interest rates on credit cards and mortgages have risen to levels not experienced in over 20 years. Inflation is rampant and shows little sign of reducing soon. Day-to-day living costs have outstripped income. Mortgage and rents have risen to levels that make the calculations used in the report completely redundant. The most relevant data is the industry sector employment report. Unless you work in healthcare and social assistance, construction or education and training in Kempsey Shire, then you're out of luck because almost every other employment category is in serious decline and will further decline if this SRV is accepted. There is no financial modelling included in the report to indicate the immediate and ongoing effect of removing so much money from the local economy to pay the SRV, or the multiplying effect this will have on our local businesses as that same money would have been spent over and over again in our community. Many businesses will be forced to close and many more jobs will be lost. A draft hardship policy has been released for those who can't pay, and going by the capacity to pay report, the numbers will be significant. It places council in the borrow now, pay later money lender business at everyone's expense. No one escapes paying. KSC just wants to sugarcoat it. This is not the only significant increase in rates. There's another sewer rate increase of 40% over 5 years you'll have to deal with. The talks of sustainability must also include becoming financially sustainable to ratepayers. Councillors have been literally thrown under the bus here. The pressure is clearly on you to either acknowledge the financial stress your community is under and reject the SRV, or vote to accept it and face the wrath of the community in ignoring their predicament. The cumulative effect this SRV will have on your community will be immense, and you, not management, will be the face of that angst. That will be unfortunate but avoidable. The vote tomorrow was not difficult. Residents have already voted and it's a big no from them.
Thank you, Mr. Scotton. Thank you.
Oh, can't I finish the last bit? Yes.
Do we have any questions? No questions. Thank you. Our next speaker is Kelly Flanagan. She's speaking against 10.1 special rate variation.
Councillors and Mayor and all you people, thanks for turning up, because I think this is the first time that my 20 years coming home as a working person, seen people care enough about turning up to a council meeting. And I thank Kyle and the Figure It Out team, because if it wasn't for you, we've been asleep at the wheel and we haven't been watching. And I think whether you pass the SAV tomorrow or not, we'll be watching from now on. We'll come up with ways to let you know that we're not happy about your community engagement efforts. Excuse me for a second. And if you do pass the SRV decision tomorrow, I think we'll ramp it up tenfold. And I think the community, your community engagement is one of the criteria that you have to put through to IPART. And it was terrible, unprofessional. I don't know if you call it uncaring or calculated. The general manager was in the USA at the time, and I found out, I think it was late September, early October, that it was somewhere on a council website, and it was under a button called Your Financial Future. I don't look at the website because I'm busy, like most people. And if you work where you don't have the internet, which is half the bloody area, I don't even have mobile data at home right now. So when you do have time and you're sitting up in bed and you might want to have a flick at something, not everybody can, and you've got to understand that. You know, that is not the only way of communicating with your people. You saw me with a sign. You saw the video of walking down the town. Rather than a market stall with a council van. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work it out. You go down to IGA, Woolworths, Coles, and you sit there because we've all got to eat. I don't ever go to the markets because I have to work. Like a lot of people, they have to go home and look after their family. They don't have the extra income to go to the market. But okay, if you did go to the market and you had a council van, normal people would just run away anyway. They wouldn't run up to it. You know, but if you had a big sign there that said, hey, we propose a rates hike again, you betcha they would have run up. Right? It's not that hard to let your community really, truly know if you really, really wanted to. Right? Not hard at all. I'm happy to embarrass myself doing it down the street. It was actually quite enjoyable. So I say a decision on the SRV tomorrow is premature, way, way too premature, and you need to put it way off because there's a lot more things you could be doing before you get to the point that you're at tomorrow. I find it quite a shambles, very unprofessional. I can't believe that an actual Shire council thinks they're at this point where they can take a vote on such a devastating, potentially devastating decision on our community. Right? Business, personal, all the pensioners. It disgusts me as a real estate agent that the rates are worked out from your property value, from your VG. Oh, Mrs. Betty Cook or whoever she is up on the top of Dalkinguy may have inherited that property. Doesn't mean she can spend that $3 million or $2 million. She doesn't have it in a bank account. All right, it's wrong. You've got to think of that. I know you can't just run out there and change that rule because, as Patterson would say, that's a state matter. Okay? And so it's too early. You have not done enough community engagement at all. You knew in April. You didn't put it in the rates notice in July or August, whenever you put that one out. And it wasn't until Kyle and the Figure It Out team got together and caused awareness. We caused the awareness. You didn't.
1 minute to go.
Then you put the thing in the rates notice the next time. The other thing is, just quickly, because the capacity to pay is crap, the rents are not that low, right? They're 55 to 60% higher in reality than what's in that capacity to pay. No Kempsey Shire Council haven't put their hand up and taken responsibility for all their waste. And that's another whole day I could talk about all the failures that have put us where we are. And there's two councillors sitting here now that have been there a very long time that know very well what we're talking about, right? And I blame them over any of the ones that have just come in because you've had years to stick up and say something. And the other thing is, you've said in point 11 you haven't done enough analysis or reviews of your processes. So how about you do that first before you ask all of us to pay up?
Order. Time's up. We might have some questions for you. Ms. Ladigan, do we have any questions? Ms. Ladigan, one quick question from me. You're talking about the valuation that's imposed on council, on people's value,
Absolutely.
The value on the land. You spoke about that. Did you understand that it's the law that's what we must take into account? We don't have any option as a council to overturn the state government law.
I understand that, and I was thinking that Councillor Patterson probably remind me of that too, but I do understand it. It's just highly unfair, and you need to realise that the effect of the rate rise and how this capacity to pay absolute crap report. If you pick it up now, am I allowed to ask questions of you lot right now? Have you read it?
No, you may not.
Okay, well, I'll tell you about it. Okay.
You've only got the 1 minute to answer.
Shut up. Paragraph 1, mistakes all through it. First paragraph of the report, they call it an SV, not an SRV. You should have thrown that straight in. How much did you pay for that? How much did Morrison Law, whatever they call, did they give you the person straight out of uni? They call it an SV all through the report. It's called an SRV. Right? How much? None of you have noticed that. It's, in the next 3 years, Then they only named 2 years. Typos, errors, all through it.
Order. That's your time, Ms Flanagan. Thank you. Our final speaker this evening is John Moore, who's speaking against 10.1, special rate variation. Thank you, Mr Moore.
Johnny.
Mr Mayor, just before I start, can I just say that if you have a meeting here in the future, can you open the doors before 3:15? Because outside we had handicapped, elderly people waiting and there were no seats.
Thank you. I'll take that as information for future meetings. Thank you, Mr Moore.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, councillors, General Manager, council staff. Today, I'm here to talk against the rate increase. Now, normally, in the past, I have been a supporter of Kempsey Council. I supported the building of this seminar. But in relation to the rate increase, there must be another way. There must be another way. Council would have to be joking if they feel that this 42.7 rate increase over 3 years is not going to affect the ratepayers of Kempsey. I'd just like to point out a few indicators. The first indicator is, look at the people in the gallery. Look how they've turned up. They've got concerned looks on their faces. Another indicator, the sales of mincemeat and sausages in the butcher shops and the supermarkets in Kempsey are going through the roof. I'd like to refer to an article in the Argus last Friday, where the reporter asked the question, Kempsey has a lot of empty shop fronts and commercial properties. How is council mitigating the probable effect on local businesses? Council's answer, there's a whole stack of reasons, lots of it bad, that would contribute to those shops being empty at the moment, and a number of those reasons aren't necessarily issues that are within council's control. Okay, well that's fair enough, but I would say some of the reasons why those shops are closed is because the ratepayers in Kempsey haven't got that spare money to support the shopkeepers. Now, if this rate increase goes ahead, I'm sure there'll be more shops closed in Kempsey. Now, that's not a good look. And it's not a good look when tourists come to town. But hang on, there's a hotline. If people are having trouble paying their rates, they can ring up council. Rubbish. I don't believe that the ratepayers should have to ring up and grovel to council because they're having trouble paying their rates. About 30 years ago, the local government introduced consultative committees. And as a result of the consultative committees, what that meant was if you had a team leader on council and they had 10 members in the team leader would receive a pay increase. Deputy leader, he also would receive a pay increase for the same amount of people in their team. Now, if a month later someone joined the team, the leader would receive another pay increase. 2 months later, another member joined the team, they also would receive a pay increase. So it went down the line. 6 months later, another team member joined the team, they would receive another pay increase. And this is what led 30 years ago to what was called staff empire building on councils. Now, I read in council blurb that they restructured and they did away with one directorship. Great. It is great, but I don't believe the council went far enough into looking at their staff component. I think this is where council can have a huge saving. Now, if council go forward and they're finding they need that 42.7 rate increase, I believe there's two other options that council can take. One is they can amalgamate with another council. Now, this is where the ratepayers would have to come in. They can't have it both ways. They can't say we don't want a rate increase, so they may have to support the amalgamation of this council with another council to save money. The other option that they have, this council, they can write to the Minister of Local Government and ask for an administrator to be appointed to this council. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you for your time, Mr. Moore.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions?
I won't answer any questions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. You don't have to. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We've got a few comments from Mr. Mitchell, and then Mr. Milburn would like to say a few words as well, just to correct some of the issues that have been brought up by the speakers. And also remind everyone now that there's a meeting in this room tomorrow called the Kempsey Shire Council meeting for the first time. And as addressing Mr. Moore's comment, the doors will open at 8:45, not before. If you could time your arrival before, up to 8:45. Thank you. Mr. Mitchell, please.
Where do you live? Through you, Mr. Mayor, I won't be answering that, that's irrelevant. Just wanted to provide some context to the community engagement commentary that was made. And there's an extensive amount of information that's been included into the council report for those who've had an opportunity to read it. What I would say is that council staff have made a genuine effort to engage in relation to this project. We put a report to council in April to flag that there was a need to undertake this investigation piece of work, and from that we then designed the community engagement process so that we could actually get out to the community as much as possible. We understand and are conscious that not everybody has access to the internet. And so the approach that was taken was very much to be comprehensive in terms of having print media. We've been on community radio. We've done interviews in terms of the local news. Attended the markets, so we did a go to markets in all villages. We approached 70 community organisations, so through our database we know there's 70 community organisations. We wrote to all 70 community organisations and offered to come and present to those community organisations. A number of them actually took up that opportunity, and council staff, including myself, attended those and presented to those community organisations and actually provided as much information as we could. There was the direct mail out that went out to all ratepayers as well. I think from our perspective, sorry, just let me finish, please.
No comments, please. Just listen. Thank you.
So just to conclude, we understand that some people may not believe that that was an appropriate approach. I think if you were to reflect on the amount of work that council staff has done and the genuine effort that we've gone to actually try and get as much information out to the community and to listen, we didn't shy away from any of those conversations, and to encourage people to make submissions.
Order.
And I think the proof in that is in terms of the number of responses that have actually been provided from the community, and that we've summarised for the councillors, and we've provided all that information has been provided to the councillors. They've got every single submission, every single survey response. So everything that we've gone out in terms of trying to obtain as much information from the submissions, thank you, Troy, have been provided to the councillors.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mitchell. For those people who think it's appropriate to call out, we are supposed to be respectful in listening to you and you listening to us. No, yelling out is not an answer. Thank you, madam. Thank you. Would you like to leave if you don't wish to listen to the explanations? Okay, well, you may leave if that's your case. If you don't want to listen, leave. No, you leave. You don't get to talk. You just leave. Okay? Councillor, Mr. Irwin, you may leave too if you don't wish to listen to the explanation. We started with the idea, it's a very simple idea, that we will listen to each other respectfully. And you do not have a debate at this time, we're listening. Mr. General Manager, would you like to explain, please, what you would like to explain?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out today, and for those of you who have actually put in submissions, that's been very informative for the councillors. We won't know till tomorrow what the decision they make based on that feedback and the feedback they've also received today. So, firstly, thank you very, very much for that level of engagement. The issue around council's financial sustainability is a long-term issue, both in the past and in the future. The idea of a special rate variation has actually been included in council's long-term financial plan and in the delivery program and operational plan for the last 5 years, all of which have been made available to the public. This isn't something that we've just started to talk about now. I'm happy to wait to finish talking. Once those that wish to leave, leave, and those that wish to stay and listen, I'll wait for them.
Let's go. Let's go. So is that the election?
Those leaving, I thank you very much for your attendance. It's quite a good turnout. Thank you.
Listen, the own constituents shouldn't be in the seats.
Excuse me, is they out front? Is there any way we can hear from the floor? What's respectful comment?
No, that's not part of our deal. Thank you. This is a public forum, and yes, we have listened to people, and anyone could have spoken. We like to share information, and we've listened to you, and Mr. Milburn has some further comments to make, and I thank all of you people who are willing to listen to further information. Thank you, Mr. Milburn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for staying and taking the time to listen. We may not agree, but that is to be expected in this sphere. But respectfully disagreeing is what we really want to do to help try and build a better community as we go forward. So as I was saying, yes, the need for a special rate variation has been in our last 5 long-term financial plans and the delivery program and operational plan documents over the last 5 years. So it's not something new. There's a few points I'd just like to clarify as we go forward. All the submissions that have been provided by the public have been provided in totality to the councillors. They've all been given. We normally do not do this at all, but we actually printed hard copies of this for every councillor. They normally do it electronically, but to get through the level of submissions, we actually provide them all with hard copies so they could actually absorb that right on it and actually take that in order to help them in their decision making that they'll be doing at the meeting tomorrow. There's a couple of things here. I'm just trying to pick the bits I need to talk about. in relation to the survey, it's very difficult to get the surveys perfect in any way, but there was definitely the option there, and many people did take that option up, and it came through very clearly that people were opposed to the special rate variation, and they made comments in there about not wanting to support the special rate variation as well. Community events, the Mayor's already clarified that. There was a comment made about the airport, Council looking at closing that, and I think there's a whole range of valid points that the Speaker made in relation to that. The idea of closing the airport was something that's actually been raised by the community as well, and it will be up to the Council. There are a lot of legal issues around if Council were to consider that. It would, if they were to go down that path, and I believe it's a very, very big if, there are really significant hurdles, and it's not a short-term fix in terms of the special rate variation or Council's rate position. But it is something that actually has come from the members of the public in this process. There was a comment made about the adventure park and Council looking at taking out loans for that. That's factually totally incorrect. Council is not and is not considering any loans or any funding to the capital of that project should it proceed. We have been advised by the state government the request for the additional funding was not successful, and we're waiting to hear back from the state government at the moment on what they determine as the status of that project, whether it will proceed or not. We're just waiting for formal notification on that status of that project, which if it were to go ahead, the capital is fully funded by the state and federal governments. The rate peg methodology, there's a number of comments made about the rate peg methodology. And where we're at the moment. Tomorrow is a single step in the process. Tomorrow, the decision the Council, should they make it, would be to either not proceed at all with the rate peg, and if they do that, they'll need to give us direction to staff to probably go into a number of workshops with them to look at where those cost savings can come from if they can't be generated through additional revenue through increases in rates. And over the coming couple of months, we would actually work through a process of going through the budget line by line with the councillors and looking at where we cut services, reduce programs, cut staff, do whatever we need to do to bridge that $8 million roughly per year, which is a significant amount of money in council's budget. Having gone through this process at previous councils a number of times, I know how difficult it is to cut those sorts of numbers out of a budget. It is not easy, and it's very painful for what ends up being our local residents in terms of the services that they actually have reduced, but also some of your friends and relatives actually work at council, and it could be their jobs that go as well. So it isn't an easy task to actually cut services from a council perspective either. But it is only the first part of that thing. If they chose to proceed, it is simply an application to IPART. IPART then need to make a decision based on all the information, including all of your feedback. You have opportunity as a community to actually write to IPART during that process as well, to express your views to IPART, to your local politicians, and IPART will then make an independent decision about whether to approve council's application in part or in whole or not at all. Council, should they, IPART, approve it in part or in full, then council in June still has to make the decision about whether or not they proceed with the rate rise as well. And then each subsequent year in June, council would need to decide whether they agree to continue with that rate rise that was approved by IPART, should it be approved. That allows a few things, and that's something that we've kept in mind here, is that people have, one person mentioned the new rate peg methodology. We're still waiting to see exactly what that methodology looks like. Historically, it's been really restrictive. It's been one thing across the entire state. And as we all know, that every council is slightly different, and some are very, very different. The Metropolitan Council is very different to the Kempsey Council. We're very different to councils way out west. One rate peg does not fit all, and the Independent Pricing and Regulatory Tribunal have now acknowledged that, and the state government have acknowledged that. We were advised last week at the local government conference in Sydney that it appears that the state government is going to accept the recommendations from IPART in relation to that rate peg review. That will allow far greater flexibility, and we may see the rate peg amount reflect more realistically what the real cost increases are and the cost pressures are in local councils. The historic way that's been done we simply have not kept up even with CPI in the councils, and it's a general acknowledgement by the Minister and the Deputy Secretary, who's the actually head of the OLG, the Office of Local Government, that it's basically forced a 10-year cycle for councils across the state to put in for rate peg increases, special rate variations. So that methodology will hopefully help prevent this in the future. It doesn't fix where we are at the moment, but it helps prevent it in the future. And it gives us some time, in 18 months' time, if that rate peg is different, then that amount may not be quite as much. The other thing with that is that IPART are now also going to be doing a review on expenditure in local government. They've been funded by the state government to do that. They'll do that over the next 12 months. So again, that will feed into, if the rate peg is approved, council on that second rate peg can then review that based on that review of IPART as well. So there's some information in that. There was a point raised by one of the speakers that the cost report used the term special variation, not a special rate variation. Special variation is a term that actually IPART use, and that is why the consultants, Morris and Lowe, actually used it in their report. It is actually the term used by IPART. When we talk to the community, we talk about a special rate variation, because if we just said a special variation, you wouldn't know what we're talking about. It's about your rates. So we include the word rates in it, and that's why that was actually put in there in that sort of a way. There was a comment made that council supported the Yes campaign in the referendum. That's actually factually incorrect. Council did not do that. Council put up on its website links to a central place where people would go and get information on the Yes and No campaigns. We did not support, council took no formal position whatsoever in relation to the referendum, other than to provide information that was available to the public in that. There's been questions and comments made that there's need for an audit of council. Council actually has an internal audit committee, independent. They are members that are totally independent to council. We're also externally audited every year by the Auditor General's office. So it's not something that, we aren't sitting here doing this on our own. The Auditor General's office actually audits every council in New South Wales every single year, and those reports are public on our website for people to read as we go through that. And they certainly do go through and raise issues about what we should be doing and how we can actually improve areas as well. I think there's only about one or two more last things there. Staff increases, yes, there has been some staff increases over the last 5 years. There's no doubt about that. And there's been two main drivers of that. One, when I started here nearly 6 years ago, we had a huge number of people, they weren't employed, we actually used labour hire. So we were contracting people. And we had staff or labour hire people who'd been with us, for 5, 6, 7 years on a casual basis, and no job security whatsoever. I know, talking to one of those staff, for example, he was put on for 11 months, put off for 1 month, then put back on. That happened to him 7 years in a row. We made a commitment when we came here not to allow that to happen. If you need a staff member for 7 years or 11 months, you make them full-time permanent. So there was a whole range. We took $1.4 million out of our labour hire budget and made them permanent staff. So our numbers did increase for very good reasons. One of the other reasons that we've actually increased is in the last 5 years, we've more than doubled the capital program we're actually delivering to you as a community in terms of the works across our roads, our parks, everything we're actually doing. That has more than doubled. To do that, you do need to increase our staff numbers. You can't deliver it with the same number of staff, but our staff numbers have not doubled in any way, shape or form. But yes, they have increased. We do continue to review every position as they become vacant to see whether they're needed or not, and we'll continue to do that as we move forward. Talk about those two things. Just one last point, the comment people are making about bringing in an administrator. Yes, I've worked for an administrator. I know what it's like to work in a council. The unfortunate thing with an administrator is that they actually replace your councillors, your elected body, and it becomes a dictatorship. To be honest, it's really, dictatorship can be a positive thing, it can be a negative thing, but you've got one person actually making those decisions instead of your 9 elected representatives. You've got an opportunity on the 14th of September next year to vote for, you've got the opportunity to actually stand for council, and I encourage people to stand for council. It's an amazing civic service, but as a lot of councillors past and present will also tell you at times it's pretty thankless, and it's very, very difficult. In the induction that we gave to these councillors when they started one of the things we actually said, and I said, and I've repeated it numerous times to them, is that they will have to make very, very difficult decisions. And that is what they'll be doing tomorrow. None of these councillors take that lightly. They've been engaged in this process for quite a long time, but they feel this pain. They are really torn about it, but they will not make whatever decision they make. And I've got no idea what decision they're going to make. I'm just as curious as you, but they will not make that lightly. They will make that on the basis of what they believe individually is the best thing for the long-term benefit of this community. That's what they're elected to do, and that's all you can ask of them. You may disagree with what they decide. You may agree with what they decide, but that's what they're elected to do, is to make those decisions. So I hope that some of that helps explain where we're at and what's actually happening in this process, and we are just stepping through this process. And we do know that it is very, very difficult and very painful in our community. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. And again, I thank everyone who's here listening and respectfully understanding that this is not an easy decision, and Council will make it tomorrow. Just reiterating what I said earlier, if you are coming to the Council meeting tomorrow, it'll be here in this cinema, and the doors will open at 8:45. In modern times, we say 8:45. Once upon a time, we said 1:45. We don't do it anymore with young people for some reason. So, yeah, that's tomorrow. And right now, I'll declare it closed, and councillors will go for a briefing. We haven't yet finished our job today. But thank you very much, all of you, for attending, and I wish you well in understanding our processes.